Early sports specialization. Is it good? Is it bad? Helping you? Hurting you? Today I want to dive into my thoughts on the topic, what I've seen with my own career, the clients that I'm currently training, what their path has been, the pros and cons that I see, and then also diving into some of the research. So this is one of those hot topics right now in sports. A big debate right now is whether or not you should be playing one sport year round, getting a lot of extensive training, or maybe you should just be playing 3 or 4 sports throughout the year, a different sport for each season. So the quick answer, in my opinion, is no. You shouldn't be specializing too early. However, long answer is there's a lot of nuance in sport. Your gender, the sport you pick, are all reasons why we'd want to prioritize early specialization or maybe delay that to later. So let's dive in a little deeper. To better understand this topic, we're going to break it down into a few different phases. So we're going to use Canada Sports' long-term athletic development model to help us explain this. We're going to look at some of the pros and cons in each phase, and then what we should be trying to achieve in those different phases. So starting with phase 1, we're going with ages 3 to 7 for this. So the Canada Sport Development Model, they like to call this the active start phase or the fundamental phase with an emphasis on fun. In phase 1, the priorities: being active, getting outside, having fun, making friends, learning the basics of sport, teamwork, sportsmanship, all that stuff that's gonna look long stream is gonna help them in their life and in sport. These activities are generally non-competitive. We might not even have a scoreboard, probably not winners and losers. It's just to get the kids out, get them active. At this stage, you probably want to be playing as many sports as you can or different activities, broaden their horizons, see what sports that they enjoy, and then we can go further down there. So Canada Sport Development Model, they like to look at the ABCs. So you've got agility, balance, and coordination. Those are some of the basics you should be learning in this stage. We want to get those fundamentals. We want to learn how to run. We want to learn how to throw. We want to learn how to do all those basic activities, jumping, maybe stick handling skills, whether that's like with a lacrosse stick, field hockey, ice hockey, stuff where we're building those fundamental tasks that will help us out later on. So we got phase 2, ages 8 to 12. Canada Sport Development Model likes to call this the learn to train phase. I like to think of it as your elementary school age kids. In phase 2, we're gonna have 2 main differences from phase 1. The first is that it's gonna be competitive. Likely there'll be tryouts, there'll be tiered levels at this point, and there's definitely gonna be winners and losers. So that's a big jump from phase 1 where it's mostly about having fun. The second is you're gonna start to get into some sport-specific training. So that may include some body weight strength training exercises. That may be rare in a lot of circumstances, but primarily we're gonna look at sport-specific practices where we're looking at technique work and then also some basic team strategy and maybe even just a little bit of an intro into mental preparation. So that's the big differences between phase 2 and phase 1. So we're on to phase 3. This is really where the rubber meets the road, and this is where you start to see those discrepancies between athletes who really drift to one sport versus those multi-sport athletes. So Canada Sport Development Model, they call this the train to train phase. I have this as ages 13 to 15, so early high school age or middle school age. In phase 3, there's a lot of things happening. Primarily, we're gonna see some big physical changes in this phase. So not only are we gonna have physical changes, but we're also gonna have performance changes. So as kids, they grow taller, they're gonna build some muscle, their body dimensions may be changing. They're also gonna see large changes in aerobic capacity, strength, speed, and power. Secondary to the physical changes, the biggest jump in phase 3 is gonna be that compete level. So now we're shifting to talent identification. If you're in a team sport, you're looking to try out for probably your elite regional teams, you may even have options for provincial or state or national teams at this stage. Individual level, there's probably some larger tournaments that you're attending. You may be ranked now nationally. So all that stuff is more and more important. So in turn, the training is becoming more important. So in this phase, you're likely going into some off-season training. So you may still play a number of sports, but you're likely, you know that maybe one of those sports is your best at this current time, so you're putting in some off-season work. That may mean some intro into some weight training. So this is probably the first time when many athletes are actually lifting weights. It also may mean some sport-specific or technique-specific coaching that maybe even happens outside of your team. So you may be looking for individual practitioners who are going to be helping you out in your designated sport. So we're on to phase 4 of 5. I have this as ages 16 to 18. The Canada Sport Development Model, they have this as the train to compete or the train to win phase. So this is your upper level high school, maybe even lower level college or late level junior high. In this phase, we're looking to build on a lot of the things that we talked about in that last phase. So we're refining some skill. We're diving deeper into the strength and power training. So last phase, we were probably just being introduced to it. Now we're looking at maybe periodized programming, especially during the season of that sport. We're also looking at now position specific or specific technique work, depending on your sport. So we've shifted from just a gross sport training model into now very technical in whatever position you're playing. You're probably also going to see showcases at this level. You're potentially going to be going on college recruiting trips. You may have scouts attending your games and other opportunities to propel yourself to that next level. Phase 5, this is the last phase. I've got this as ages 19 and above. It's split into 2 different aspects. Canada Sport Development Model has it as active for life. So that's whether you're playing recreationally or low-level competitiveness effort, or continuing in that train to win phase. That's if you are a college athlete or professional athlete or maybe a high-level amateur. In this phase, if we kind of ignore the train for life phase, those who are just looking to stay active and healthy, have fun, maybe some lower level compete. If we just look at that train to win component, those elite athletes who are college, pro, high amateur, what we're gonna see is further specialization. So I think everyone can agree that at this point in time, if you're 19 years old, if you're playing on a college or pro team, you probably wanna be specialized here. One main sport, maybe some fun recreational sports around, but you're solely focused on your single sport. So that's gonna be more technical work, maybe specific coaches for different aspects of your game. So no longer do you have just your team coach, you've moved on from that. You've moved on also from position-specific coaches, and now you've moved on to coaches specifically for one activity. Maybe you've got a jumping coach, maybe you have if we're looking in the context of golf, maybe we have a putting coach, we have a swing coach, and we have a mental coach, maybe we have a dietitian, etc. So you're building a team around you of very specific practitioners to help push your game to that next level. We're also going to be looking at periodization. So now that we have a focused sport, we can look at it over the course of a year or 2 years or an Olympic cycle, maybe 4 years, where we're going to have very specific training cycles, both in terms of your strength, power, conditioning side, as well as your technique and skill or your sport training. So everything is kind of maxed out to the elite to help you perform now. So with that breakdown of the timeline of the different phases and what's kind of expected in each phase, I want to dive into my thoughts, some of the research that has come out about early sports specialization, and how you can kind of strategize to formulate the best plan for yourself or for your kid. So I'm just going to go out and say it from my experience as an athlete, as a coach, seeing a lot of the research. If you're specializing before the age of 15, you are likely hindering some of your long-term athletic capability. I'm going to give you 3 reasons why I think that. Reason number 1 is that we're building a bigger athletic toolkit by playing multiple sports. So if we think about the analogy of building that pyramid, it's often said that if we build a wider base, so we've accumulated more athletic endeavors, more athletic challenges, different activities that we're faced with, we'll be able to peak that pyramid at a higher level. So I definitely agree with that. The more we learn how to learn, I think is what the big component is. So if I'm constantly faced with different stimuluses that I have to respond to and learn about, that goes in the bank, which long-term I think is going to help us peak at the highest level we can, no matter what sport we choose. Reason number 2 why I don't like early specialization is it's going to put us at a greater risk of injury. So overuse injuries are becoming more and more common now. You'll see it at the professional level, but you'll also see it at a much earlier level, even into junior high school now, but especially in that kind of senior high into college. Serious injuries are becoming more and more popular, and I feel like that's a large component of that. People are specializing too early. A good example I'll use here is baseball. I was a former baseball player myself. What they found is as kids have shifted more and more to single sport athletes, they're throwing or hitting, we'll use throwing as the example, they're throwing year round. So they're throwing 12 months of the year. They're also doing more and more strength training in the gym, trying to throw harder essentially, and they're not getting the rest they need. So as they're growing at a young age, while they're still throwing with so much force, we're running into major Tommy John issues. The rates of Tommy John surgery, which is a repair of your ulnar collateral ligament, which kind of runs across the elbow, have gone through the roof in the last 5 years. So that's kind of reason number 2. I think if we specialize too early, we can put ourselves at a much greater risk of a serious injury down the road. The last reason why I don't like early sport specialization is just the risk of burnout. Now, there are absolutely kids who love playing their sport every single day of their life. They're excited to head out the door to play whatever it is and be out there for 6 to 8 hours. So there's definitely those kids. And if you're one of those kids, then burnout is not as much of a risk. But there are many people who pick their sport at age 11 or 12 and go all out and then are completely mentally fatigued at the sport and bored by 15 or 16. And then they end up never playing that sport again, and oftentimes actually never playing other recreational or competitive sports, and that can turn into long-term kind of health consequences. So if you're excited to go out and play the sport, then I think that's a great thing. So I know I kind of played sports seasonally for most of my life. So when basketball season was coming to the end, I was super excited to start baseball. And that drove me to practice way more often and give me really that mental stimulus to stay engaged. So I want to back up kind of my thoughts with a little bit of research. I'll include the links below in the description of a few studies that I'd love you to dive into deeper, but I'm going to go over a couple here for you today. So study number 1 was looking at Danish athletes. They're comparing elite level, so world-renowned athletes who are competing in Olympic and World Cup level and finishing highly in the top 10, I believe, comparing them to sub-elite, so still successful athletes, but those who were only achieving success in national competition, so within Denmark and within some of the European competitions. So that was the separation. What they found was those that did not reach the world-class level, those who were in that sub-elite category, specialized about 4 years earlier. So the average age of specialization for the sub-elite athletes was around 11 years old. Those who made it to the world-class level, who were finishing top 10 in Olympic and World Cup events, those waited till about 15 years old. So that's something to think about there. I think it was about 250 athletes. And I know that's not a big time frame, but that kind of aligns with my thoughts as well. So the second study was a British study. It was looking at their national level youth athletes still, so the ages of 16 to 18, and how many sports they played at a younger age. So what it found was that when they're looking back at ages 11, 13, and 15, those who did play at the national level were much more likely to have played 3 or more sports in those 3 categories of 11, 13, and 15. So that was a lot of information, hopefully not too boring for you, but I want to give you my recommendations based on all that info that we just went over. So in phase 1, up to the age of about 7 or 8 years old, you want to be playing a wide variety of sports and really focusing on having fun, enjoying it, maybe just starting to figure out what you're a little bit better at. So what I also recommend is picking sports that are both individual sports and team sports. I think if you play all team or all individual, you're not exposed to the opposite. So a little bit of individual, a little bit of team is good. Also picking a diverse type of sport. So if we're picking very similar sports, I don't know, baseball, cricket, golf, those are probably all too similar. Let's pick a little bit of variety there so that we can build that athletic toolkit. So phase 2, my recommendations, that's that kind of 8 to 12 elementary school age. What I'd say here is pick a seasonal sport. So pick 3 or 4 sports through that year. No off-season training. You can maybe do some general exercise, body weight stuff, maybe going to the park to do running and sprinting. What I'd also recommend in this stage is still to play recreationally. So don't just play your designated sports for those seasons, but have your kids go out and play a pickup game of basketball. Have them go out and play a game of backyard baseball. Stuff like that, playing and improvising is really important. Try new tasks, try to juggle, try to do gymnastic type activities, balancing, parkour, all that stuff. Still continuing to build that athletic toolkit. Don't focus on necessarily skill specific training yet, but again, we want a lot of play and then maybe picking 3 or 4 competitive sports through the year. So phase 3, ages about 13 to 15. This is where I think some people would start to disagree. I think a lot of people would agree with me for those first 2 phases, but this 13 to 15-year-old phase, I would recommend probably having 1 or 2 sports that you kind of know are your better sports. So I would say a max of about 3 competitive sports at this age, but 1 or 2 where you know you're going to put more time in. So at this stage, what I would say is if we know my main sport, let's use myself for an example, was baseball. So from late spring to early fall, so maybe a little bit longer, about 6 months, baseball is going to be priority. I'm probably practicing 3-4 times a week, plus my games, and even into the off season, maybe take a break on some of the stuff, but maybe still working on some of those core technical skills. But still very important to play at least 1 other sport here in this stage. So if you're in that 13 to 15-year-old range, I think you should be playing still at very minimum 2 competitive sports. So phase 4, that 16 to 18 years old, this is, and along with the studies as well, I think this is a time when we can start to specialize on a sport. So that doesn't mean you're not doing anything except for that sport. So we're gonna specialize on that sport. If you're a freak athlete, if you're a LeBron James or whatever, you can still be elite in 3 or more sports. There's a lot of guys who could have played at least 2 college sports, and that's completely fine. If you're that level of athlete, go ahead, play a bunch of things. But I would say specialize on 1 specific sport. Go ahead and go out and get that training that you need. So hire those independent contractors, whether it's a strength coach, whether it's a technique specific coach, a performance coach, whatever it may be. You need to put in those hours to separate yourself from that competition. Give you those skills and those traits that are gonna give you that opportunity for a college or scholarship. I will say in that 16 to 18, you should still be at least playing 1 recreational sport. So whether that's playing an intramural sport in high school or playing a weekly pickup game, all that is good. But so focusing on 1 primary sport, but still getting some relief from that sport and playing at least 1 sport recreationally. I think here you probably want to set that maximum competitive sport to probably 2 or 3, but 1 prioritized sport here in phase 4. In phase 5, there's not as much to say. If you're a professional or athlete or college athlete, you don't need to be listening to me, that's for sure. But what I will say is that many high-level professional athletes are playing recreational sports. Yes, they're not playing competitive anything else, but they are still playing other recreational activities. I know in college myself, our college baseball team, there's a lot of guys who would play pickup basketball, with athletes from other sports as well playing, and golf as well. So make sure you're doing something to keep your brain fresh so that you're enjoying your sport that you've picked as your priority. So that was a lot of information. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Obviously a hot topic in today's world and a debate, and I don't expect you to fully agree with me, but if you're kind of indecisive or not sure what to do about yourself or your kid, I think this video can help you out for sure. So if you enjoyed it, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks.